Formula One is back in Baku this weekend, which means it's time for your Don't Crash course. Everything you need to know ahead of a race weekend, as well as a little bit of history about the track. Baku is a relatively new street circuit. The first Grand Prix took place there in 2016, and back then it was known as the European Grand Prix. In 2017, the Grand Prix there continued, but it shifted to the name we know it as today. And that 2017 Grand Prix had a very surprising podium. Daniel Ricciardo took the win, and Valtteri Bottas and Lance Stroll rounded out the rest of the podium. At that time, Valtteri was driving for Mercedes, and Lance was driving for Williams. Visually, this is one of the coolest circuits we have on the track because we get to watch Formula One cars race around these medieval buildings. And let's talk about the circuit itself. A single lap around the Baku circuit is 6.003 kilometers. We run this Grand Prix for 51 laps, making the total race length 306.049 kilometers. There are 20 turns and 2 DRS zones, and those DRS detection points are just ahead of turns 2 and 20. Now, Baku is a pretty interesting track when it comes to setups. Because we have these incredibly long straights that allow for very high speeds, teams are going to want to have low downforce setups that maximize that ability. However, the rest of the track also has a number of twisty, tight turns, and to be able to maximize your car in those turns, you need a little bit more downforce than you would want for the straights. So teams are going to have to balance those two different downforce needs to be able to bring the best setup to this circuit. The fastest lap record here is held by Charles Leclerc. He set that record in 2019, and that lap time was a 1:43.009. And not to give Ferrari fans any undue hope, Charles Leclerc has taken pole position at this track every year since 2021. However, similar to his Monaco curse, we have not seen him convert that pole position to a win yet. But that's not necessarily a Charles Leclerc problem. Since Baku started, there's only been a single driver who's managed to repeat race wins here. That was Checo Perez, who won in Baku in both 2021 and 2023. In terms of previous race winners that are still on the grid here, we have Lewis Hamilton, who won this race in 2018, Max Verstappen, who won this race in 2022, and of course Oscar Piastri, who took this race last year in 2024. And of course, speaking of the McLaren driver, McLaren has the chance to close out the Constructors' Championship this weekend. If they do, that would mean that they would take their second title back-to-back at the same circuit that last year they took the lead in the Constructors' Championship, which they ultimately never relinquished. Coming into this race, McLaren holds a 337-point lead against their closest competitor, Ferrari. And with only 346 points left on the table this season, they just need to extend that lead over Ferrari by 9 points. Additionally, they need to make sure that they are not outscored by Mercedes by 12 or more points, and that they are not outscored by Red Bull by 33 or more points. So as long as they come out of Baku managing that point lead, the Constructors' Championship will already be decided at the end of this race weekend. So heading into this weekend, there is a lot to look forward to. Does McLaren manage to clinch that championship title? Will Charles Leclerc continue his incredible pole position streak? And will he manage to stand on the top step of that podium for the first time at this circuit? This has been your Don't Crash course for Baku. Be sure to let me know what your podium predictions are, and make sure to come back for a tire strategy breakdown.